Hello, Chrissie Shirley here, and today I would like to introduce you to a book called Right Recovery for You. There's a lady called Marilyn Bradford who is an addiction counsellor. She's an international speaker, psychotherapist and teacher who has worked in the field of addiction for over 20 years. And she's created Right Recovery for You. And here's her book, Right Recovery for You. I'm just going to read a little bit from here for you. And this chapter is called End Judgment, End Addiction. So she's got a very different way of looking at addiction. And we're bringing Marilyns Bradford to New Zealand this year. Not sure when, don't know where, but we will definitely let you know when we get something sorted out. But end judgment, end addiction. What she says here is judgment is a cornerstone for all societies, and it's a huge part of what holds your addiction in place. She says here, I'm going to talk about judgment and its relationship to addiction. You might ask, judgment, what does judgment have to do with addiction? And she says, absolutely everything. You might also ask, what do you mean we say end judgment, end addiction? You make it sound like it's easy. The truth is that for many people, ending judgment is neither easy nor simple. Judgment forms the foundation of all societies and cultures. From the time we're very young, we are taught this is right, that's wrong. You're a good boy, you're a good girl. You're a bad boy, you're a bad girl. These kind of judgments follow us throughout our lives. There's a way we're supposed to look. There's a way we're not supposed to look, a way we're supposed to talk, a way we're not supposed to talk, things we're supposed to do, things we're not supposed to do. And that's just the beginning of the way judgment permeates our lives. As we grow up, judgment takes on a more varied and diverse forms. We encounter judgment from our family, from our friends, our culture, religion, our religions, our colleagues, our bosses, and our neighbours. And often we align and agree with these judgments and try to fit ourselves into what we are told is right, so we can play the game like everyone else. And in the process, we diminish ourselves. We're really aware that we've done it because it's not always easy to recognize judgments for what they are. And sometimes they can be very subtle. Or perhaps we don't align and agree with the judgments that get delivered us. Some of us go into resistance and reaction to the judgment and rebel against it. We actively try not to do what's right, and instead we try to fit ourselves into roles and behaviours that are not socially acceptable. But either way, we have aligned and agreed, or we've resisted and reacted to, and we've attached ourselves to that judgment. We make it significant, and in the process, we lose part of ourselves. What's the difference between judgment and awareness? She asks. It may help to clarify what judgment is if I contrast it with awareness. I can say it's a beautiful day, or that dog looks sick, and you might wonder whether I'm expressing a judgment or an awareness. That's because I can say the same words with judgment or with awareness. So how can you tell them apart? When you express an awareness, there is no energetic charge. You don't have a sense within you of good or bad. You're simply acknowledging what is. When you express a judgment, there is a charge. You get a feeling from the statement. It can be positive or negative, but in either case, it's generally a strong feeling. Judgment is always arbitrary. There's another key point about judgment. It has nothing to do with what's true or real. It is always based on an arbitrary point of view. It's a personal bias. It's a belief or an opinion. 100 years ago, many people in America went along with the statement, spare the rod and spoil the child. In other words, if you didn't beat your kid, you weren't being a good parent. It was a judgment, and nowadays those people would be arrested for child abuse. What was the judgment that children should be beaten based on? Nothing. It was just an arbitrary idea people went into agreement with. And around that same time in America, women didn't have the right to vote. People of colour and minority ethnic groups didn't have the same rights as everyone else. All of those people were judged, and sometimes they still are, as being less than, wrong, deviant, or unworthy. Once again, all of that is arbitrary. Judgments are never about truth, but we buy them as if they are. And because they're accepted by almost everyone around us, they're often difficult to recognise for what they are. So Marilyn says, I grew up in an academic family in the northeast of the US, which is oriented around its grand old academic institutions like Princeton, Harvard, and Yale. My father was a professor and a scientist at one of those universities. And there were lots of judgments in our family in our town that the only thing that mattered was your IQ score and the academic achievements you attained. It was commonly believed that only people who were not up to par intellectually would engage in business. No one would go into business unless they couldn't make it in the academic world. You notice that I was like, what is she saying here? Because being an academic was the only worthwhile thing to do. So that was a judgment. There was absolutely no allowance for people to pursue their unique interests and talents and abilities. It was incredibly narrow, and needless to say, I picked up heaps of judgments about the whole academic thing, but I didn't see that until I moved across the country to Texas, which had some equally narrow, contracted and uniform judgments, but in a totally different way. Few people in Texas cared about your scholastic aptitude test scores or where you went to school. For many, it was all about sports. Often an entire town would turn out for a high school football game, and that's what they cared about. For them, isn't that interesting? That's what was valuable, correct, and significant. And if you were a female, it was about being flashy. Texas is an, if you've got it, flaunt it state. Neither the judgments of the people in the Northeast nor the judgments of people in Texas encouraged individuals to identify and develop their own unique talents and abilities and to go in whatever direction their interests led them. I'm not saying there aren't people in these areas who don't go against the accepted judgments of what's valuable or correct. However, many people receive negative judgments for the choices they make because they counteract what the majority has decided is important. We buy judgments as true and real to the degree that we do not ask questions and become aware of other possibilities. If the society says the most important priority should be family, then it's difficult for individuals who by nature are entrepreneurial or artistic to feel free to make their art or their business the priority in their lives. It takes concentrated effort to ferret out the judgments that we've bought. Judgments are sometimes so deeply ingrained and persuasive that they're almost undetectable until you actively start looking. So this is just a small quote from this book, and I will continue on this because this is very interesting, and I'm sure you're going to find that interesting as well. This is the book called Right Recovery for You. It's very interesting, it's well written, and it's got some very good information in it. My name is Chrissie Shirley. If you would like more information, please get in touch with me. And if you'd like more information about Marilyn Bradford, please get in touch with me. How does it get better? Thank you so much for listening.